Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Season 2, Episode 16, The Lonely Mutation of Baxter Stockman. It finally happened in this episode, and it's something I've been waiting for since Baxter Stockman was introduced. And Stockman has finally been transformed into basically his superior counterpart, which is the Fly. It makes him stronger. He's still fairly smart. He's still the same genius that he was before, but now he's actually a deadly component to the turtle universe. He can fly, he's sort of stealthy, and they put a lot of gross scenes in this because they show how flies eat, which was something that just really stood out to me because it was sort of gross. But aside from that random component, everything about Stockman has basically just been stepped up. He's become an advanced character. And even though he's still the same character he was in certain ways, which we really get to see at the end, where Shredder spares his life and he basically cowers to him at the end, which could easily be him being smart and trying to figure out how do I use these people to get the retro mutagen now that I know it's a thing. So that it could have been the classic Baxter Stockman, or it could have been the conniving version of him now that he knows he has the power to take these people on, at least in some aspect, like how he took on the robot foot ninjas when Razar went to see him in his laboratory. So I can't wait to see just how things advance for Stockman throughout the rest of the series and how it changes the series because, of course, him in this episode, he's incredibly fast. He was constantly a component for the Turtles not being able to save April's dad throughout this episode. But I love the entire scene at the end of the episode. I think it was the last 5 or so minutes, probably more than that. That was my favorite part of the episode just because it was such a crazy race. And this was a great episode, not just because Baxter actually changed finally, but they did a lot of cool things like Donatello not being able to actually grab April. That really surprised me. I thought he'd catch her and everything would be fine, but he didn't, and she fell in. And I knew she was immune to the mutagen because I remember that from some episode, but I could have sworn that everyone knew that. But I guess that happened and she hadn't told them yet. But I thought they all already knew that she was immune. They just obviously weren't going to be like, yeah, she's immune to Baxter Stockman. But the main point of that being a problem was that Stockman was going to go into the mutagen too, of course. But fortunately, she got out of that, and Casey being there, he helped out. He hit Stockman and he knocked him out of the way. And that was a great scene too. And I love when she came out. She was just like, "Nice catch, Donnie." I thought that was really funny. But it had so many great moments like that, and them constantly not being able to get the mutagen. I wasn't sure if they really were going to be able to save him, and I thought they might. And then they had the scene where it actually did break, and I thought that's a crazy ending for this show. It wasn't like the happy ending I was expecting, but she does actually end up saving his father, and it was done in a cool way. I thought the one little drop, it was amazing that even saved him, but I just loved how all of that played out, and April just had to think on her feet, and she saved her dad in the end, and it was a great way for her to do it, and it wasn't just, oh, they lost, which would have really sucked, or they just won like a typical show. They did it where it made you think no one wins, and then April used her cunning and she saved her dad anyway. But great action scene towards the end. It was cool to see Razar in there. When he went to Stockman, that was a great way for them to sort of portray how advanced Stockman has become physically, even though he's deformed and of course he's like a fly now. That scene really showed how he's very, very fast and stealthy now that he's been transformed into the mutant fly version. So it'll be cool to see that come up a lot more in future episodes. And I think now that he's been turned into a mutant, there's not much that they can really threaten him with, and he's smart enough to find the cure on his own, especially now that he knows that April is the reason for the cure. She's the reason. Her DNA is the reason it works. So it'll be interesting to see if he decides to continue to use Shredder and then eventually break off and do his own thing because he has the smarts and he always did. The problem was he never had the strength to fight back, and he was always that really weak character, and he's still fairly weak as just a fly, and you can't go up against like a wolf with like razor claws, but he's smart enough to use his mutation to his advantage. He can fly, and he can get out of the range of anyone, so he's gonna have to use that to his advantage, and we'll have to see if he decides to do that and sort of branch off and go his own way and become sort of a third faction in the show, and that would really be fairly cool to see him sort of just fighting against everyone, and maybe bringing back the Mousers and stuff like that, so that he can take everybody on and then actually join in the fight himself. So we'll have to wait and see for that. But great introduction to him as the mutated fly version Stockman. Great action, loved all the scenes. I even noticed that the opening was different, and I could have just missed this in the past couple of episodes, but they actually include Casey in like the last little scene, which I loved how they did that. And he doesn't say anything; you barely even notice him. He's just sort of like leaning on the chimney, and he's just watching the turtles as they go up towards like the very end of the title screen when they're on top of the building. I thought that was a nice little ad. They sort of took out the part where they're skateboarding inside the sewer and replaced it with them grappling, and that was how they transitioned into adding Casey. And like I said, I could have missed that in the past couple of episodes, but I finally noticed it in this one if it wasn't the first one. And I love that he was finally in there. I thought that was pretty cool. And other than that, it was just a great episode. We got all the heroes. Like I said, we got Casey in the episode, so that was really good. We got April in it. She was obviously a main component, and they sort of introduced the aspect of the retro mutagen, which is obviously huge, and it sucks that it's gonna take so long for it to really come back. So it in one way it's really cool because that means they're still gonna have these problems, but in another way it means that it'll they're gonna have to put in a lot of different stuff. It won't just be like, hey, we found the cure, let's make retro mutagen. It takes 10 of the giant vials just to make, I think, two of the little tubes, Donnie said. So it won't be a quick fix for all the characters who've been mutated and stuff, but they introduced the mutagen, or the retro mutagen, as a way to turn Splinter human, and that was really interesting. And I hope they bring that back. I hope the concept, even if it's not actualized, I hope they have a moment where Donnie has like a huge scene with Splinter and stuff, and it's fairly emotional and things like that, because they had a really small version of it, and even at the end of that scene, Splinter like actually had his picture, and you could see he was, when he knew it was a possibility. Of course, he told them to save April's dad first, and he mentioned how he still has this humanity and stuff. But in that second scene with Donnie, he had his picture of himself, his wife, and his daughter, and I thought that was just a really great scene. They just showed his face, and that was really the last we actually saw of Splinter, I believe. But I hope they don't just let that pass. I hope they bring that up and Donnie sort of talks to him again, like, I really want you to have this mutagen so you can be human again, and then they just have a really good confrontation about that. Sort of some inner workings in the Splinter's mind, because we don't get to see that too much, because there are just so many elements to this show that they focus on. And we haven't really gotten a ton on Splinter outside of the simple backstory. Well, I can't say simple, but aside from the backstory between him, Shredder, and of course Karai. But I'd love to have that come into play, even if it's not something that can really happen. Just to hear his thoughts on that, and hear him talk about how he wants to be human again, and not just say like, oh, go save that person first and then save me. I want to see him just be himself and talk about what he worries about and how he would love to be human and just walk on the streets and stuff like that. I think that would be a really powerful scene if they did it really well, and I think they would, because the show's just well written. But I'd love to see that if they're gonna, I'd love to see them actually bring that back and not just let it go, because it's a really important concept for someone who is human to be transformed into a rat, of course, and then he has to live under the sewers for over a decade, almost two. So I hope they don't just let that go, and I'd love to see it. But great episode. Also had some hilarious moments. One of my favorites was where Michelangelo was talking about what would happen if he used the retro mutagen, if they turned human, and what his face would look like. And then he popped his head down. Then they had like sort of the fake face come up. That was actually the voice actor who plays Michelangelo, and I thought that was so funny that they actually did that. And they held his head there for quite a while. I thought that was just really funny. But they had a lot of silly moments in this episode, and a lot of just cool stuff, like when Baxter, when the thing actually did blow up and he thought it didn't work, and then it blew up on the back of his head. It was dramatic, and then it sort of, all the little vials exploded, and he just fell against the wall and stuff, and he was freaking out because he knew it would change. Even though that wasn't funny, of course, it was a really memorable moment because At first, I thought Shredder just stopped it. I thought he like let go of the button or he did something else and he kind of just let him go, and that's why he walked away. And it was just like he didn't say anything, but it was supposed to teach him a lesson. Like next time, that fear is gonna have a really bad consequence for you. It won't just be fear; it'll be actualization of what I told you I was gonna do. And that's what I thought. I thought he kind of just taught him a lesson and he let him go. And then it blew up and it was a really nice dramatic scene. But it was cool that he changed in the beginning too. I actually thought it was gonna be closer towards the middle, and he would have messed himself up and did it that way. But it was just Shredder being Shredder, which is always pretty cool. And I feel like we haven't seen Shredder at all in a long freaking time. Like he has like tiny bits and pieces here and there, so it was good to actually see him. And I really, really hope that he's a big part in the next episode. But I don't think he's going to be because, from what I remember, it kind of focuses on Casey. So, oh well, but at least it's on somebody new, so that's cool. One other big thing that they did in this episode, before Baxter turned, he was talking about all the different creatures and stuff, and he had the silly picture of the duck, which was really funny. He mentioned a pig and a rhinoceros, which of course refers to Rocksteady and Bebop, or Bebop and Rocksteady, because that's just how they say it. And I actually saw some pictures of them online. I think they are officially going to be in the show because before this episode actually aired, some pictures were released by some toy company or something, or at least the art that will be used to create the toys. And they have Bebop and Rocksteady there. I can't remember who is who. I think Bebop is the pig and Rocksteady is the rhinoceros because Rocksteady makes sense for a rhino to me, but I honestly could be wrong about that. But Bebop is like incredibly skinny in this. He looks kind of weird, but he has a cool design. But I'm really used to like the old 80s version where he's really like just a fat pig, but he's actually really skinny, a lot like Zebra was when he was human. He's like really, really skinny, but he has the mohawk and the glasses. And then Rocksteady is he's like a big rhino. He actually kind of looks fairly similar outside of the fact that he's in 3D and not 2D. But they look really cool, and I cannot wait to see them introduced in this show. And I'd love to see if it's how campy it'll be because their role in the universe is basically to be the campy sidekicks, and they're like constant failures. So I'd love to see how campy it really gets, especially considering the sidekicks, or I guess servants that Shredder has now, where it's Brad and Zebra, and they're insanely serious. And then to counter that with Bebop and Rocksteady, I think it would make a really cool dynamic, not just within their group, but for the show as a whole, because they can do so many different pairings that way, and then just have all of them attack the turtles, and just it would make for so many different varieties. But I can't wait to see them actually come into this show. But great episode. Comment below, let me know what you guys thought of it, your favorite parts, your least favorite parts, and how do you guys think things are going to go for Baxter Stockman? Do you guys want him to be the same type of character and just turn human again, or do you guys want him to sort of go nuts and be an over the top powerful villain? Comment below, let me know, and thanks for watching.